Alright, science in pajamas again. Hi, Ripley. With my little co-teacher here, Ripley. Yes, you good boy. You go stick your breath, but you good boy. Alright, so today we're going to talk about multiple alleles and how that goes beyond Mendel's laws as well. Now, what we mean by multiple alleles is more than what you would expect. Now, a lot of the traits we've been talking about up until this point, we've only had two different possible alleles. So when we're talking about Mendelian genetics with dominant versus recessive, let's take the example of the pea plants. They came in tall or short, so a capital T or a lowercase t. Two possible alleles. With the codominance and incomplete dominance, same thing. A red flower and a white flower, so just a red allele and a white allele came together. They either made pink or they made red and white, depending on if it was a codominant or incomplete dominant trait. So that means you only had really three possible combinations of the alleles because you had RR, WW, or RW. But what if there's more than two possible alleles? What if there are other choices? Now, it doesn't mean that you yourself will have more than two because you only have two copies of each gene, which means you can only carry two alleles. However, it doesn't mean that there's only two in the population. So multiple alleles are when there are more than two possible alleles within the population. And a great example of this I'm going to use today is human blood type. Now, how that works is we actually have four different. We have three different alleles, but it leads to four different blood types. Now, we're only going to be talking about the A, B, and O alleles. I know there's, positive and negative, O positive, O negative, A positive, A negative, etc. That's actually controlled by a completely different gene, and we're not going to worry about that one today. So we're just going to focus on blood type, as in the alleles that are present. All right, so human blood type. There are, if we were to break it down, which color do I want to use? So we'll use red because, blood type. So for human blood type, sorry about that, there are four blood types. So these are the phenotypes. So what kind of blood can you have? And that includes, there we go. You can have A, so you can be blood type A. You be blood type B. You be blood type AB. Or you can be blood type O. Now the interesting thing about this is that means that there are actually more than two alleles to have this many type of bloods. So the alleles, a lot of times how we show this is with the letter I and then a superscript. So you can have the IA allele, that's for blood, or that's the one that would lead to blood type A. The IB allele, and leading to blood type B. And then we have a lowercase I. That's what leads to O. Now here's the thing. What we're showing here is that there are actually two dominant possible alleles. There's the A allele and the B allele. Both of these are dominant. So we see codominance here as well. That's how you can have A blood, B blood, or AB blood. And then notice the little tiny I, the lowercase I. And that's because that allele, which leads to O, is recessive to these. So we see both multiple alleles and codominance going on here. Plus, we still have a regular little recessive O. So from three alleles, we get four blood types. Now, I know I say now a lot. I've noticed that. Let's look at the different possible combinations of these alleles. So the different allele or genotypes we can have in a population. We can be homozygous for the A allele. We can be homozygous for the B allele. We can be homozygous for the O allele, the recessive allele. Now let's start talking about some of the heterozygous choices. We can have A allele and O. We can have B allele and O. And we can have A and B allele together. So let's figure out what each one of these genotypes would represent. So we have 2 A alleles. That means this would be blood type A. You have 2 B alleles, you'd be blood type B. If you have the recessive alleles, you are going to be blood type O. If you have a dominant A allele and the recessive O allele, because that one is recessive, you are going to be blood type A. A dominant B allele with a recessive O allele, you're going to be blood type B. And here we have the codominant alleles. So they're both dominant, so you'll be blood type AB. So in other words, there are 2 ways that you can have type A blood. If you are homozygous for A or if you are heterozygous for A. There are 2 ways you can have type B blood. If you're homozygous for B or if you're heterozygous for B. There's only one way to have O, 2 recessive alleles. So you're homozygous recessive. And if you are codominant, then that means you are heterozygous for both dominant alleles. Now, a lot of times kids are like, well, what does that mean to be A, B, or O? I will tell you. Give me one moment. Let me just erase this. So what this leads to is certain antigen receptors on the blood cell, the blood surface of the blood cells. So in some of them, I'm going to draw 4 blood cells. On some of them, they may, or a type of blood type, sometimes talking and doing 2 things at once isn't the best. So there might be these round receptors on one type of blood. Or there could be these other receptors. Now let's say you were type A blood. Maybe that's this first one. Let's see. We have type A, meaning you're going to make these particular type of receptors. So your genotype is either going to be homozygous for A or heterozygous for A, meaning that the second allele is the recessive one. If you make the other type of receptors, you're type B. Which means you're either homozygous for B or you are heterozygous for B. Either way, you're only making those certain B alleles. Now, if you are type O blood, it actually means you're not making any receptors. So you're just like that. You're plain. And then if you are type AB, then what you're going to be making, since A and B are codominant, it means you're going to be making both of the receptors. Because remember, in codominance, it means that both of the dominant alleles are being expressed. So there's the A receptors. And then we also have the B receptors. Now, this is actually why it's very important for certain people to give blood and why they need to know what kind of blood type you are before they do a transfusion. Because these receptors, they recognize each other. Well, I shouldn't say they recognize each other. If you are type A and you have these receptors, and they're going to be looking for other blood types other blood cells with those same receptors. If it doesn't find them, if it finds something different, then that means that it's going to view it as foreign and attack it. So if you have type A blood, but you receive type B through a transfusion, think of it as like cellular war. It will actually cause health problems, and it could be fatal if left untreated. You have to be very careful with blood transfusions. Now, if they don't know what blood type you are, they're going to go with O. Since it has no receptors, it is the universal donor, meaning anyone can get it. Since it has no receptors, it's not going to interfere with the receptors on A, it's not going to interfere with the receptors on B, and it's not going to interfere with the receptors on AB because it has no receptors to interfere with those receptors. So A can only get A blood or O. B can only get B blood or O. AB, though, that's universal receiver. It can get AB blood because it's the same type. It has the same two types of receptors. It can get O blood because there's no receptors. It can get B blood because it has some B receptors. And it can get A blood because it has some A receptors. So it can get all the types of blood. Again, we're not taking into the account positive and negative. A blood cannot get AB because it will still recognize that there are other receptors and still view it as foreign. Same with B. So O's universal donor, AB universal receiver. And we can see how one phenotype, two phenotype, recessive phenotype, codominant phenotype, where we see both of these together there. So that's what we're talking about with multiple alleles. There are other cases of this, but blood type is usually a pretty good one because not only does it talk about multiple alleles, but it also has, the regular dominant recessive relationship. And since we have blood drives at our school, a lot of kids know, a little bit about blood types. So I just thought it's typically a good example. And until next time, you guys stay cool. All right. Stay healthy as well.